Hey everyone, welcome back here to Techstrong TV. My next guest is Mr. Mike Manos. Mike is the CTO of Dun& Bradstreet. I know a lot of you have probably heard of Dun& Bradstreet, but I don't think you really know what Dun& Bradstreet is today. Mike, welcome to Techstrong TV. It's great to have you on.
Alan, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me on.
Fantastic. Hey, I'm really looking forward to talking about what Dun& Bradstreet is today, what they're up to, how AI is changing the equation perhaps. But before we get to that, I always like people to understand who's talking to them. I mentioned you're the CTO at D&B, but how'd you get here, Mike? What's your career path been like?
Yeah, I think if I were to categorize it, it would be a little bit of undiagnosed ADD meets technology career, and kind of went all over the place. So I came out first as a developer, moved into big infrastructure and networking, and then slowly progressed through my, building out data centers and, throughout my career. So, I have the benefit of today working for Dun & Bradstreet, a company that's, I think, pretty well known both nationally and internationally. Prior to this, I was the global CTO at Fiserv, one of the largest fintech companies in the world, and have done executive stints at AOL, Disney, and Microsoft. Prior to this, so it's been a great journey. Originally from Chicago, so used to the cold weather, but living today in Jacksonville, Florida, which is not as cold.
So I got you. I'm from New York. I'm down in Boca Raton. No, it's not as cold, but we've been cold the last couple of weeks. You have too. You've been incredible, like below freezing cold up there. It's been pretty bad here, but what a great resume, Mike. You've been in a lot of big time, serious enterprises. Congratulations. How long you had Dun & Bradstreet?
I've just completed, I'm in my fifth year, just getting close to completing my fifth year here. And when I got hired on here at Dun & Bradstreet, it was really focused on driving change and transformation, really around modernization. And so if you were to sort of characterize the journey over the last 5 years, it's really been about how do you take a 186-year-old company and move it to the most modern, bleeding edge types of things, of launching AI products and moving out of traditional data centers into the cloud and all of these kinds of things. So it's been a pretty incredible journey of that modernization for sure.
Absolutely. 186 years. When you think about it, they say if you go back, I think it's 50 years. Like there's no companies from the Fortune 500 today that were there 50 years ago. That's how quick the turnover is in the corporations. 186 years is a testament.
I think when I started, Alan, I think we still were using Abraham Lincoln's typewriter to do access in our data centers.
Absolutely. And now we don't even have them on pennies anymore.
That's right.
But Mike, as we mentioned in the outset, and I think is what you've alluded to a bit, is Dun & Bradstreet, like many organizations, especially in this AI world era that we live in now, has had to reinvent itself.
Yeah.
Right? So let's talk a little bit about this reinvention. And it sounds like you are the instrument of change over there, right? You're driving modernization.
At least on the technical side. On the
tech side, you're right. That's what we focus on.
I would not say for the rest of it.
Yeah. Well, if the tech leads, the other stuff follows, I always think. But anyway, Mike, tell us, and I'm going to assume AI plays a starring role. It seems to be the theme. But tell us about today's Dun & Bradstreet. What should people take when they hear the name Dun & Bradstreet? What should they think?
Yeah, I think it's one of those names, Alan, where everyone has heard of Dun & Bradstreet probably for a very long time, but they don't actually know what Dun & Bradstreet does. They probably associate Dun & Bradstreet with the DUNS number, which you historically would need to have to get a tax ID with the U.S. government or to sort of validate or verify that you are a real business. or in some cases, especially in the small and medium business side, to be able to get loans. Right, we have a score called the Paydex score, which is kind of like the credit score of an individual, but for businesses, which is something we maintain. But I think if you go back all the way to the beginning, all 186 years back to the beginning of the firm, we've always been involved in data. I made a joke earlier about Abraham Lincoln's typewriter, and I say that because we've had a bunch of U.S. presidents, Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, a bunch of other ones that have worked for Dun & Bradstreet. And in every case, what they did is they would ride their horse into town, figure out who the grocer was, who the blacksmith was, and they would collect that information, bring it back, and create lists and take that data, although it wasn't necessarily called data back then, and compile that for the state governments or the federal government at the time. And so Dun & Bradstreet's always been about data. It's always been about the collection. It's always been about the accuracy of that data. And it's about going out and getting that. And so over the last 186 years, however you've categorized what Dun & Bradstreet was or what they did, it was always about going out and getting data. And as you know, AI is great, but AI is nothing without data. And I think that's where these stories start to intertwine with each other. If you think about where we've come, we now do business in over 200 countries around the world. We have what I call our most valuable natural resource, which is the trust of all of the governments of those entities, plus the businesses within those countries, to make sure that we will handle that data appropriately, that we will be regulatorily compliant, that we will, honor the requirements, et cetera, in terms of the different views. And so when you think about just the size, I know we're on Techstrong TV, but you think about we ingest, a little bit, well, actually a lot north of about 5 exabytes of data every night. We process that data every night. We categorize that data. We process it. We put analytics on it. We get other data around that data and the metadata. We put that back into our data. So the data supply chain that we have is absolutely world-class. And when I say world-class, it's because it spans the world and it's compliant to all of the differing, regimes. As a computer science person, everything needs to be efficient. But when you start getting into things like data on the global stage, it becomes a lot more human or more human factors that you have to factor into, which makes it less efficient, but a more interesting, harder problem space to solve for. And so when you think about Dun & Bradstreet today, we are one of the largest data ingesters, normalizers, and then we take that data and we sell that data, or we market that data for businesses to use in their own business applications. We do that for risk businesses, for credit businesses, banks, large financial institutions, sales and marketing businesses. And the sheer volume of that data that we consume is mind-numbingly large if you think about it. So all of that comes into play as we start to talk about AI, because when you start talking about AI, it's great when you're thinking about a commercial application, or not a commercial, a sort of consumer application of AI. It's going to make a funny picture that has me dancing like a bear, or, I'm being somewhat flippant about that. But when you start getting into commercial grade, enterprise grade use cases in AI, you need commercial grade, enterprise grade data to power those decisions through the AI interfaces. And that's really what we've concentrated on over the last 5 years. So, we've modernized. We started 5 years ago. We still had data centers. We're now 100% in the cloud. We're now, if you think about, this is sort of last decade's problem, right? We're now 100% in the cloud, and we're now delivering out of different regions around the world. We have this new architecture, and we've launched probably over 20 different AI products specifically focused on the AI delivery of that data to our customers.
Said couple of mouthfuls there, Mike.
Yeah,
let
I'm
me
sorry.
no, it's okay. Let me jump in here where I can a little bit. First of all, I would put forth the proposition that Dun& and Bradstreet doesn't just make that data available to partners, customers, third parties, but it's the analysis that you provide, right, in ingesting that data and analyzing it that makes for, I used to call it actionable intelligence,
Yeah.
right, that people pay the money for, right? That's your premium money. But, it's an interesting thing. I did an article a couple of weeks back. One of the godfathers of AI says that we're never going to reach super intelligence with the current LLMs. Part of the reason is that the LLMs that all these frontier models are running, they've scraped all the data they could scrape, right? Publicly available data. But yet they estimate that 90% of the data that can be accessed via the internet is behind corporate firewalls, is not publicly available. I would imagine in Dun& and Bradstreet, of all these exabytes and petabytes of data you guys are ingesting, there's a real good chunk of it that is public, but there's also probably a real good chunk that's private, especially to make a better mousetrap, if you will,
Yeah.
than what you might get, just with a frontier model.
No, absolutely. I think if you think about our data, all the different feeds, it's that highly curated, private, proprietary data that makes the biggest difference. That's actually what most of our customers come to us for. It's not necessarily just the public data. We have that. We normalize that. We have people have probably heard of the Duns number, right? So the Duns number is sort of like the ultimate index around a business. We can get, ultimate beneficial ownership of who owns it. And we have all these different factors around the public data, but we can then merge that and sort of enrich that with a lot of private data and a lot of differing data sources that really give you the real value of that. And I think public data is fraught with lots of, there's inaccuracies, there's regulation around what can be sent, where it can be sent, who can store it, where can it be stored, all these different things. And so if you're an enterprise consumer trying to take this data in or make decisioning on from an AI perspective, to do that, you need to make sure that your ability to hallucinate is closer to 0 than 1. And I say that through the AI lens, right? So in our world, a hallucination is a wrong answer that might cost a bank millions of dollars on a credit decision, right? So you have to be so focused on making sure that the quality is there, it's the veracity of the data. It's not just the volume of the data. It's the veracity, how good that data is. Do you have the lineage of that data in terms of, can I back that up, that I got this from a reliable source that would be a good source of those things? And then also on top of that, it's making sure, and this is something I think it gets lost a little bit now today because of the hype and such that's around AI. But when you start thinking about the security around AI, and do you have the entitlement to use, just because you have this data, do you have the right to use this data in the way that you want to be able to use it, or that you've been permissioned to use that? And when you start getting into things like, identity and access management, but at an agent level, for example, it really gets super complicated. And that's where things like, we spent a lot of time driving a big global platform that's standardized, that ensures both compliance to security regulations around the world, around the data, as well as the on-ramp for us to be able to launch products very quickly, launch MCP services around different kinds of data, but also make sure that our customers have the confidence that the data that they're receiving has all of the characteristics that they need to make sure that they can make the smartest and best decisions in their use cases, and that data is something that is trustworthy and compliant, on a worldwide stage. I think that proprietary component of that data mixed with the public, unified on the DUNS numbers, which people all over the world use the DUNS number as the index, is absolutely key and a big differentiator for us, actually.
Absolutely. Hey, Mike, we're about out of time. 15 minutes goes so quick here. I apologize. But, dnb.com is the main Dun& and Bradstreet website. Where can people go within the website, though, to kind of See, sort of, Dun& Bradstreet eating its own dog food, living this AI experiment in real time. Where would be the best place to send them?
Look, I think there's various, if you go to dnb.com today and you looked at our website, there are AI journeys. We talk about our chat DNB, which is the ability to kind of interface with that data. And we have various journeys and various use cases that you can follow on that website, at any time to get a little bit of a deeper insight for sure.
Very cool. 186-year-old company reinventing themselves right before our eyes, right? Good job, Mike. I keep up the great work. Come back and keep us posted on what's going on there.
Will do. Thank you so much, Alan.
All right. Mike Manos, CTO, Dun & Bradstreet here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be back.
Welcome to Security Boulevard, the cybersecurity podcast from the Future Room Group. Our episodes explore a variety of topics within cybersecurity and the technologies behind it. You can find us on securityboulevard.com, the Security Boulevard YouTube channel, Techstrong TV, and every one of your favorite podcast platforms. Yes, even that one. I'd like to take a moment to introduce our co-hosts and guests for this week before we jump in, starting with one of my stalwarts, Mr. Mish Ashley. Mitch, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you on this both warm and cold day, depending on wherever you are in the world. Yikes.
And joining us for the first time is another friend of mine, Mr. Steve Palooka. Steve, tell everybody who you are.
Pleasure to be here. I'm Steve Palooka. I've been in computers and networking since the mid-'80s, retired most recently from the service provider side of things, running security and the network architecture in that space, and definitely looking forward to talking about this.
And we're looking forward to having you join us. Of course, my name is Tom Hollingsworth. I am the person for all things security at Tech Field Day, which is a part of the Future Room Group. And let's jump into today's episode because I want to talk about supply chain hacks. No, I'm not referring to that Bloomberg article, and you know which one I'm talking about. I'm talking about a very interesting supply chain hack that we found out about last week. It involved everyone's favorite IDE, Notepad++. If you're someone who has been doing programming for a while, and I'm talking about real programming, not vibe coding, where you actually have to type out the syntax, you probably know what Notepad++ is. It has become universally lauded as the thing that Notepad should be. And a lot of people have downloaded it over the years, and it's constantly being improved. But one of the things we found out was that it was improved in a specific way over the last couple of months. Someone was able to inject code into the update system that would allow nefarious actors to redirect certain people downloading Notepad++ to a different download location that would then allow them to serve up a version that had been compromised. And there's a lot of talk about this on the internet. In fact, I thought it was rather hilarious that I found out about the hack only after I had watched a video that had been posted on YouTube talking about the history of Notepad++. I'm like, wow, this is kind of fortunate. And then like 2 days later, I'm like, oh, that's why they published the video and were so big at the end about talking about how they were going to be authenticating downloads from secure mirrors and things like that. So I want to kind of open up the room here to my guests for this week. Have you used Notepad++ before? Were you aware that it was a smaller shop? And what are your thoughts kind of around this whole supply chain hack that people were able to pull off with it?
Jump in with it's a well-established tool, as you were kind of alluding to there, Tom. Been around for a long time and used by the technical community. I don't happen to use it much anymore using other IDEs, but it serves a purpose in the ecosystem, if you will. In one way, this is not a new thing, right? We've seen supply chain hacks, and this is coming through, redirecting you to a different update server, which happens to have updates you probably don't want to get. And unbeknownst to you, this ran from like June through December or something like that. Some for some while before it was detected. So, my curiosity about it is, why did it take so long to get updated? Hacks are going to happen. Package managers are a huge supply chain attack source, target, if you will. Just like update servers are, it's kind of reminiscent, if you will, of, that the one you were talking about in Bloomberg that happened with the distribution of code updates. It's part of what we have to defend against. So it's not just about secure code; it's about the infrastructure that distributes secure code.
And I want to make a point real quick that you brought up the fact that this is not something that's new. If you used a Windows laptop from the year 2000 on in an enterprise, you have dealt with a redirected update chain. If you've ever used Windows Update services, that is literally what it does, is it pulls down the entire Windows Update catalog and it redirects your local domain-connected machine to that server so that you're not constantly going out to the internet to pull down service packs and things like that. So this is known technology. We've known about this for years. I think it's interesting that, this kind of came to the front because we've seen other attacks like this. I want Steve to kind of get his thoughts in here before we talk about, another famous supply chain hack that happened a few years ago.
Yeah, I'm definitely aware that Notepad++ is a big part of especially the enterprise side of things. But most of the companies I've been at, since in actually the vast majority of my career, we've been running on Macs. So we're not using Notepad++, which is a Windows-based system. But in the enterprises that I've had contact with, it is very common for the developers to be using this because of the feature set that they was by developers for developers, and really stellar in that regard. So I think the given the target that they appear to be going for, and as you mentioned, using the existing technology that's designed to do what it's designed to do, it was a very, very clever insertion into the technology and using everything that would be expected to be seen. And it doesn't surprise me that it took 6 months to be noticed.
And just so everybody knows, the attribution that we've seen right now is that it was a nation-state-backed group that did this. And I think that the fact that they were very quiet about it is the reason why it escaped detection for so long. They weren't redirecting everybody. They were redirecting specific targets. And that is why I think people started to kind of get into the fact this was nation-state backed. If this had been, we'll just pick a random group out of a hat, like a Lapsus group. Not that they're known for this kind of thing. They're more insider threat type people. They would have just blanketed it, right? Like everybody would have had the compromised version, and someone would have done a hash check on the files and went, wait a minute, this isn't right. And they would have gotten found out probably after a couple of weeks. But the fact that this was extremely targeted, that it escaped detection as long as it did, until someone finally said, wait a minute, something doesn't work here. This feels an awful lot like the SolarWinds compromise from a few years ago, where they injected compromised DLLs into the build process so that they could essentially have presence where they wanted it, but they didn't make a big deal about it, right? Because we know from the the wonderful postmortems that have been done for years that they were targeting U.S. government agencies and large enterprises to exfiltrate data. They were not saying, oh, well, I'm going to crypto lock your monitoring infrastructure and demand a Bitcoin from you to unlock it. No, this is not the smash and grab type stuff. Because we talk about this all the time, right? We tell all of our people in cybersecurity, lock your doors, lock your windows. And they're like, well, what good is a door lock? And I'm like, against casual thieves, a door lock is amazing. But if you are targeted, no door lock can save you. You just have to hope you never get targeted. And that's what we're seeing here, is that the group behind the Notepad++ compromise, they had very specific people in mind when they did this.
Well, it's they're both supply chain hacks, and they're they're different parts of the supply chain, if you will. You mentioned SolarWinds and being part of the build process. It's a pretty sophisticated process of being able to hide so that while you were doing builds, if it seemed to be drawing in attention, it would ratchet down what it was doing. In this case, they got access to, I think it was a PHP process that did a call out to, I think it was WinGup, that it was doing updates from. So it wasn't actually the Notepad++ code, but another component that it relies upon and getting access through that way. So I think what it informs us is, yeah, it can be your code, it can be your build environment, it can be the supply chain that you're of what gets created through other sources. It can be the sources that distribute that supply chain into your processes. And here they got access to a hosting environment to replace that PHP process, to point it to some different servers. And of course, it all came down to, I believe it was seeing IP addresses suddenly going out to China in large quantities, and which draw the attention. Of course, there's ways to hide that. So why did that? You would think that the bad guys would have hidden that. Maybe they're busy hiding other things. Who knows what the reason was? But it came down to some basic incident management sleuthing to figure out what happened.
I think the key difference between these two events, the SolarWinds and the current Notepad++, is the vehicle of entry. They compromised the hosting provider and were doing redirects there at the server level of the hosting provider, as opposed to compromising the actual company itself and the stream of data in there. So it allowed them to be more stealthy as a result of that. Now, some of those did end up going back to China, but the vast majority didn't. And some of the incident reports that I'm reading shows that the targeting is really worldwide. Enterprises in South America and in Southeast Asia and of course the United States as well. So it was a very, very selective and targeted effort. The other thing I haven't seen verified is that the Notepad++ themselves may have been made this slightly easier by the way they handled certificate authentication in the process, and by inserting themselves as a unique certificate authority. Apparently, they made the process of inserting these harmful files easier.
I think they were trying to make it easy on their users, right? Because that's one of the things that we've seen over the years, especially as we try to create these secure infrastructures. Like when we put all of these things in place, like you have to have matching certificates and things like that. Like we actually just saw that with Apple iOS as we're recording this. Apple had to release a whole bunch of new certificates for older versions of iOS that are technically not supported anymore, because if they didn't, like a lot of services were going to break because the certificates were expiring. We've also seen it from companies like Cisco, where they let a certificate expire on a SASE box, and it knocked the whole thing offline for like a day. It's always the balance, right? In security, we have to have a system that allows people to do their job, but securely. Because I was thinking about this, like, how would you defeat this without creating this onerous system of double checks and certificates? And my first thought was pop up a hash value. Like, all you got to do is have the hash value fetched from Notepad++ servers, and then pop the hash value of the package that you downloaded. And if those two things don't match, and just put it up on the screen and go, here's the hash value, here's the downloaded hash value. If these two things don't match, stop what you're doing right now. And it
worked in this case, though, because they could have intercepted that communication.
You're right. But here's the thing, and this goes back to the door lock analogy. If there's an extra check that you're not expecting, that means that the casual idiots can't find it. The really dedicated ones will catch it. And, it's like making sure that you're modifying every little thing so that it passes all of the checks. Sometimes that's less valuable to people because it's more work. But then you get into these, the chicken and the egg problem of, I need to secure this, but it's going to be too difficult. Well, then how do I do it? You're always going to be chasing this, right? Because in a lot of places, like, Microsoft's solution would have been, we'll just use Notepad because it's integrated into the OS and we control it. Yeah, and that's corporate America's response was probably like, don't use Notepad++ anymore. Which all of us would have turned around and went, yeah, sure. Anyway, going back to using Notepad++. So like, how can we create infrastructures that balance ease of use with enterprise level security?
I think what this points to is something that I've disagreed from day one, which is this shared responsibility model, shared security model, that it isn't one person that's responsible, it's all of us. At the end of the day, you're responsible. If it's your app, if it's your service, and all the providers you use to deliver it, it's your butt on the line and when something happens, right? So you just said, why don't we just replace Notepad++? It wasn't their fault that this happened. It was a hosting provider, right? Did they pick the wrong one and they were derelict at it? No, I doubt it. It's probably just a flaw. Maybe some credentials got stolen. Who knows how the hackers got access to this particular server? And as you mentioned, Steve, they were intercepting this in the hosting environment outside of, really what the app builder had control of. So, the question is, where were the faults in the hosting provider? Now, they've since, I think, changed to a different one, which is a natural thing to do. Nothing to say that couldn't happen at somewhere else. So at the end of the day, I think we have to be really clear about, yeah, there may be a shared responsibility model, but at the end of the way, the butt on the line is yours when you're delivering the service, no matter who your partners and service providers are.
And I think in this case too, what I really didn't like about the way this is coming down is that everybody wants to blame somebody else. And the truth of the matter is, everybody made a mistake here, because this wouldn't have worked without all of those mistakes coming together and being exploited as a team. So I thought it was kind of almost childish to say, "Oh, well, we fired that hosting provider." Ha ha ha. It's like, no, you had your own mistakes too with the way you're handling the verifications and the certificate authority. I mean, it was not smart to put yourself in as a root certificate authority. I mean, that was your mistake. You own it. You own part of this too. And to try to say, "Oh, well, we fired them," like, this won't happen again. It's like, well, you were partner in there. It was your thing too. It wasn't only you. And that's the thing I liked about the shared security model is we have to be a team with our vendors, and especially in software, because this stuff, nobody writes 100% of the code for 30 years. You're getting bits and pieces everywhere. You are a team, whether you like it or not. If you don't like the guy playing third base, tough, he's there. You don't like the coach, tough, he's there. Got to work with these people.
But I think that, go ahead, Mitch.
As a captain, every team has a coach. It's not a commune of software people that get together and assemble code and it kind of goes out the door. And ultimately, if you're running a business or you're producing an open source project or whatever, someone is in the lead, right? And that's who's going to be held accountable, or at least visibly. What the consequences are a whole nother thing. And you're right. It wasn't one chink in the chain or link in the chain that had an issue. It was multiple. So I think just blaming the supplier, to your point, is that, yeah, it's not my fault because this is a shared responsibility model. They didn't hold up their end. Maybe they didn't, but maybe you didn't either.
And the other thing I'll say kind of to that team mentality is there's another piece of the team that loves to point fingers, and that's legal and risk compliance, right? Because to them, if I can prove it wasn't me, then it's not my fault. And then I don't have to provide any services. I don't have to pay out insurance policies, what have you. And I feel like a lot of times developers and technical people are very much of the mindset of, yeah, it's a problem and we need to fix it. But it's not our problem. I don't care. We need to fix it. Like, we need to go help that team figure it out. We need to go do this. And legal's like, we're not touching it because then we own it and now it's our problem. And we have that mentality because so many times when economics gets involved, Fernando's not on the show, but I'm going to talk about economics, folks. When economics gets involved, it is the reduction of resource outlay is the primary driver, right? can I prove this wasn't me? Then I don't have to pay anybody for this. If I can prove that it wasn't my fault, I don't have to improve my processes, which is a resource contention issue. And rather than that, I'd take a page out of Harry Truman's book. The buck stops here. Somebody has to answer for all of these things and fix the problem. And I feel like, that's kind of what the shared responsibility model is it's forcing people who don't want to be involved in that process to be involved in that process.
And they have to be, because look at how this came down. No one company, no one person can fix this problem. This is a team problem and a multi-company problem. And most of the high level hacks like this are. So, yeah, I have seen that attitude with the responsibility, the fiscal and and legal. But in my opinion, that's going the wrong direction, and that's bad for a company. And the people doing that are undermining a company in the process. Even they may save you $10 today, but they're undermining your company in the process.
Like all things, it's usually never one thing or the other, right? There's a multiple factorial problem, right? So you have multiple interests. Yes, there's a financial damage and liability issue that you know who's going to bring up. And that's always going to happen. It's part of your incident response process to bring in all the communications and legal and all the different processes, the part about how we're going to respond to this incident. And unfortunately, it isn't just the right thing to do all the time. It is the right thing to do for the company and their customers, which isn't necessarily what we might believe they should do as individuals or even customers for that matter. So I don't think that system's changing anytime soon. And I think it's just how do we best work through it, right? There's times your legal is going to be all over you about you can't say that. You can't, be open with it. And then you're going to have other times like CrowdStrike where the CEO is out there talking openly about here's what we did, here's where we're at fault, here's what we're doing. Yeah, and they get sued. But, their customers appreciate it, to your point, right, Steve, when you're being open and transparent about it.
Yeah,
No, unfortunately.
yeah, and obviously, the bigger the company, the more at stake, and the more likely you are to have those kind of restrictions put on you, and also the business that you're in too. The more that's at risk.
Yeah.
My contention would be that if you concentrate on the issue at hand and working as a team to solve the issue at hand, that's going to put you in a much better place when it comes down to the end of the day in the year, 2 years when the court battles are over. The actions you took in that proactive way, in that open and an honest way is gonna actually pay off in financial terms in those lawsuits.
So I just had this random thought because I think it would actually kind of help this process along a lot. So we know in our offensive security type things, we have the red team and the blue team, right? Red teams are the attackers that are trying to destroy the infrastructure, and the blue teams are the ones trying to figure out where the holes are and defend it. What if we had red teams for policy? So like we go in and we're like, I'm going to try to shoot holes in your risk management system, in your policy. Like, oh, your disclaimer didn't cover that very specific instance, which means I get paid out. Like, I feel like if you could shred that and force people to adapt the way that they do things, it would actually go a long way to helping organizations kind of get past that comfort level. Like you mentioned, like one of the things that they thought was okay was, we'll just install this root certificate from Notepad++ and you won't have any problems. That was a solution to a problem years ago. And now it doesn't work anymore because we have the compute power, we have the capability to basically spoof that. So that forced them to using a global signature of the download. And I'm not saying that, Robert Redford and his group of ne'er-do-wells from Sneakers, great movie, by the way, would have been able to do this. I'm just saying that if you get complacent with your policies and your procedures, that's when people start attacking. They're not going to attack your guard post at the fence line at 4 o'clock on a Monday. They're going to attack it at 3 a.m. on a Sunday when everybody is relaxed and nobody thinks anything is going to be going wrong.
I think that's a very good example of what I refer to as stress testing, right? It's stress testing the process, stress testing assumptions, stress testing what we think are axioms or unmovable or unchangeable things are environment, and whatever I may believe about what the lawyers are willing to agree to may not be accurate, right? It may be just my perception or bias or whatever it might be, to your point. And I think that's part of the red teaming could be just about as much about policy as process as it is technology. I think to the point is ultimately, I kind of feel like, we're ultimately interested in seeking the truth. Now, what gets disclosed and how it goes through all those processes and all of that, we really want to understand what happened. Because if we seek partial truth, then we look for blame, right? Because we don't want to disclose what really happened, because then we'll get blamed for it. No, we want to understand what happened, right? What really occurred, and false ignorance isn't going to help us when we show up in court and they show us the evidence that we weren't willing to face ourselves.
And it helps the community too. If you the best of these post-incident reports give all those details, and those details don't just help your customer understand what happened to you, they help the blue and the red teams everywhere saying, "Oh, that could happen to me. Let's take a closer look at this and fix my own things so it doesn't happen." It gives that unique information because this hack in this way hasn't happened before. Now we know about it. And because you've disclosed the details, everybody knows about it and they can start to protect themselves as well.
And that's why I like the postmortems that go into detail about why things went wrong. If you want an example, if you're listening to this podcast, you're like, well, how do I write a postmortem that does that? Just look at anything Cloudflare's ever done. Cloudflare writes the best ones. And they do assume blame when something goes wrong. I remember, we were talking about one of the Cloudflare outages last year, and the CEO and the CTO flat out in a LinkedIn post said, "We failed you today." Like, you don't have to fall on your sword, but you do have to help people understand, and not just stopping at the moment where you figure out it was these people's fault. Because I feel like that's, it's like a cognitive impairment, right? It's like, oh, yeah, it was the hosting provider. Well, we're out of the mix. How could you have prevented that? That's what you should be asking. Do we need to switch hosting providers? Do we need to switch the way that our architecture works? If you can work through every problem like that, you'll have a much better solution. And if you can't implement it, you can talk to people about how to implement it. It's like, hey, we noticed that this happened. We're going to change our system to do it like this, but you should be changing it for not only us, but for other people so that this doesn't happen either.
The emphasis you put there on not assigning blame. The best companies that I worked for, when we had these incidents and we did we had an outage or whatever, not necessarily a security incident, but an outage caused by, a failure of one sort or another. The best companies never mention the name of the engineer who made the mistake. They just outline what went wrong and why it went wrong and why we have a new procedure or what procedure should have been followed so that these outages would not have occurred. It should never be about blame. It should be about process and making things better going forward.
Well, and I think too, it's just maybe my view on shared security model and the flaws in it. I think that the real issue is you could change providers, cloud providers, and carry with you some of the same problems that led to the problem happening in the first place, right? There's parts of it that you own as well, maybe all of it, as well as you can also argue that by working through the process with that provider, you may determine, look, it's so broken, we don't want to be here. But more than likely, you're going to work with them and say, okay, we see where the flaws in the whole process were, what we did, what they did. Maybe it was a communication breakdown. Maybe there are other things that are working together. I think it's more of a collaborative security model, right? Because ultimately, that's what you have to do in situations where something does break, is you've got to collaborate to find the truth of what happened. And then you want to know what everybody what actions are appropriate that everybody's taking. They've decided they need to do, we've decided we need to do, et cetera, to understand that we've really made the situation better and hopefully alleviated that happening again or the likelihood of it happening again.
Yeah, I think that's a much better word. Shared collaboration instead of shared, and I do understand what you're saying. As a I would say AWS in particular tends to use the shared model as a way to push off responsibility for having to do things. But the idea that no one entity in a hosting environment, especially, the customer and the hoster both have responsibilities in this. It is a shared model, but collaboration is a much better way to think about it than shared.
I agree, but you've got to get buy-in from everybody, right? Because one of the things that ultimately ends up happening is you get almost everybody on board, and then one group decides to torpedo the whole thing because, well, that's not how we should do it. Like this feels wrong, or it goes against the way that we've always done it. And I feel like we're starting to see more and more of those outliers causing those problems. It's like if you would follow the process, it would just work every time. But I don't want to follow the process. And sometimes you get away with it, but it's like anything that you can think of when it comes to statistics, you may get away with it this time, but on a long enough timeline, the chances of you getting away with it every time are zero, and you can't dodge that bullet forever. And I feel like some people just well, we know this for a fact, people are bad at math. There's a reason why prediction markets exist, and it's because people are bad at math.
Yeah, the lottery, the tax on people who failed math.
Or otherwise known as Vegas.
Right. Well, but it does feel like that, right? It's like every time you pull that slot machine handle because there's a thing sitting out there, whether it's, a supply chain attack from Notepad++ or opening an OpenClaw instance to the entire internet on accident because, well, I didn't know. Well, they won't notice it. But then there are force multipliers that cause that to become more of a math problem against your favor, like Shodan scanning for all of these things, or stuff like that. Like I think people need to understand that it's better to be lucky than good, but it's way more effective from a security perspective to be good all of the time than lucky a little bit. All right.
Than a bear, I just have to be faster than the guy that's going to get caught by one. Yeah, it's not a great strategy when there's only one person the bear's chasing.
Just one other thing about this incident that I think should get everybody thinking is those high level groups like the Chinese and like the Russians are very likely to succeed in getting to you. So one of the things I think every company now needs to start thinking about is who are my customers that are their targets? And if I have customers that are their targets, what do I need to be watching for? And that's perhaps where the hosting provider or Notepad++ may have been better in their blue teaming operations.
A conduit to the real target, right?
Well, I think that's probably a good place for us to wrap it here. I mean, we could go on for a long time about this. Maybe we'll come back to it. Yeah. So I want to take a moment for our guests to kind of share some of the stuff that they've got going on. Mitch, of course, is probably one of the busiest people that I know. Every time I turn around, he's getting quoted in another publication or he's coming up with a new report. Mitch, what are you currently working on that people should be looking out for?
I've been spending a lot of time in the observability space and rethinking how we do embedded observability, whether it's for security or governance or operational aspects. And we've always talked about shift left for security. Well, that model's kind of broken and we've never really used it in a way that's helped us. And I have this concept about observability native solutions, meaning that we've built it into. And I'm working on a framework for the agent control plane, the whole environment that agents are created, operate, run, governed, et cetera. So I'm working on a analyst insight report on this framework that I'm going to be launching. And hopefully it, It's helping me understand this a little bit better because certainly a very complex environment to figure out how do we do this in the world of AI. More or less in today's environment, still a complex environment to do that in traditional software too.
Awesome. And Steve, if people want to see some of the cool stuff that you've been working on or learning about, where can they go to do that?
Probably the best place to follow the things I share is on LinkedIn these days, or I've got a Blue Sky account as well. But I would say I'm mostly interested right now in understanding how the tooling of AI is going to affect the networking industry going forward. I see a lot of really cool and exciting things happen. This is equivalent in my mind to what happened in videography in the in the 90s and the early 2000s, where instead of needing engineers to do videography, everybody had it in the palm of their hand by the end of the cycle, and now everyone can do video. And I think networking is going down the same path with the help of AI, and I'm really excited to see what's going to happen here.
Super interesting. I'd love to read some of that, Steve, when you're ready. Sounds awesome.
And of course, if you're interested in some of the stuff we do at Tech Field Day, make sure you check out techfieldday.com. We just posted some videos as we're recording this from an event that Steve was a part of, AI Infrastructure Field Day. We also have some upcoming things related to cloud. I, of course, will be at RSAC this year, along with several of our Future Group folks, and we'll have some great Tech Field Day content coming out of that. We want to thank you for listening to this episode of Security Boulevard. If you enjoyed this conversation, you know what to do. Head over to YouTube, subscribe. You can also subscribe in your favorite podcast application of choice because we don't want you to miss any of these wonderful episodes. And the other thing is, if you want to leave a rating or a review or even a comment on any of our stuff, that really does help the show grow because those platforms love to highlight things that people take the time to talk about. This podcast is brought to you by securityboulevard.com and the Future Group. If you want to check out show notes or see past episodes, the best place to go is securityboulevard.com. You can also check us out on the Techstrong TV website, or if you're more of a mobile person, use the Techstrong TV app. That's available on Apple TV, Roku, iPad, iPhone. If anybody wants to get it running on a BlackBerry, I'd love to see that. But otherwise, make sure that you're following Security Boulevard on X, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Just look for Security BLVD. There's lots of great content out there that you're going to want to tune in for. And we hope that we'll see you next week.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Robert Cooke, who's the CEO at 3Forge, and we're having a little chat about, well, app engines and specifically how they're being used in the finance industry, but I suspect they might be applicable elsewhere as well. Robert, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mike. Great to be here. Thanks for having me on today.
So level set this for everybody. I think everybody's familiar with application development and they have platforms and tools, but what exactly is an app engine and what's different about that approach than what we have been doing?
Right. Okay. Well, so app engines have actually been around for quite a while. They've been used in other industries, just not in finance so much. So an application engine, the definition will vary a little bit depending on who you ask. But the definition I like to go with is, first off, it's an engine for running an application. But the distinction is it's also a workbench or integrated development environment for building applications. So it's not just about the ability to run an application, it's also about being able to build and maintain applications. And if you'd like, maybe I'll start off with just an analogy within the gaming industry, because that's where application engines have been used for quite a while.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, right. So first off, if you look within the gaming industry, obviously the gaming industry is a mature industry. It's been around for quite a while. Just as a quick aside, that's where I kind of cut my teeth. That's what got me into building high-speed systems, was trying to always fight the CPU and see how, eke out that extra little bit of performance by building tighter code. But with that said, if you look at the way video games are built today, whether there's a handheld device or something that's, running on a desktop or your Xbox, whatever it happens to be, your console, inevitably that is running on an application engine. There's a few big engines out there, Unreal, and so on. I won't go into all the details of it, but there's a few application engines out there. And any video game you play, there's about a 95% chance it's built on one of those application engines. And if it isn't, it's probably been built on an homegrown internal application engine, like something like EA Sports. So stepping back, if you wanted to build a new video game, you would not sit down and start to build a 3D environment and then say, I'm going to build my own physics engines. I'm going to build all the logic for non-player characters, things like that. What you would do is you would take one of these application engines and then you'd think about, well, I want to build a 3D video game. So you'd use a 3D workbench where you would start to lay out these characters in a 3D environment. And if you wanted to change things, you would use that 3D environment to make those changes. This is, I think, very logical. This is how you would envision a video game being built. You're not building it one line of code at a time. You're using an environment that's designed to help you within the environment of the application you're trying to build. Now, if you look within finance, let's rewind pre-application engine. People are using languages like Python, Java, C++. These are general purpose languages that are not really designed for finance. And so the IDEs, the development environments in which people are building these applications are also fairly generic sort of environments. And so really, again, what an application engine is about being able to have an environment that's suited, that's designed for letting you build your use case and run that use case. And that's what makes an application engine so different from any other type of framework.
And why is the finance industry finally coming around to this? And will I see this in other sectors besides gaming and finance?
Well, you can see it in other sectors now. Government uses, so Palantir is very big within the government. Within IoT, that it's also very popular within there. General Electric has a product, and so does Siemens. There's a few other companies that have an application engine for those different industries. You've got Salesforce within retail. And so, yes, most industries have application engines. So I'll go back to kind of the first half of your question is why hasn't finance had it? Well, I think finance has a unique set of challenges, which has made building an application engine slightly more complex, but still nonetheless very doable. So within finance, we're dealing with very legacy systems and also very new systems. So it needs to be able to kind of cut across both of those. I'd also say when you get into finance, you have this unique challenge of you're dealing with big data, historical data, but you're also dealing with very real-time moving data. And so you need to be able to bridge those as well. And so that's why I think it's been more piecemeal in terms of people building out these solutions instead of thinking about it holistically. In order to build an application engine within finance, it's a very multidisciplinary field that you need to be willing to go into. Look and feel, being able to build front-end applications, you have to be willing to also understand, data virtualization layers, what it means to access many different systems, what it means to be able to handle real-time moving data, and perhaps most importantly, being able to understand what it means to be able to deal with these sort of regulatory environments and entitlements, et cetera. So being able to kind of bring all those disciplines together. And I haven't really talked about AI yet, which is the new field that, obviously we're putting a lot of attention towards as well.
So if I move to an AMP engine, how does it change the way I think about building and deploying software? And today we have a massive amount of infrastructure around the developers, and there's DevOps teams and software engineers and all these folks. So does that get streamlined somehow?
Yeah, well, absolutely. That's the whole idea. Because right now, first off, when you decide to go with an application engine, you're really saying that you have a part of that is having the engine itself, the full stack environment. So what we mean by full stack is having a database that you can rely on, having and by the way, I mean a real-time database. You also have a historical database. You also need to be able to have a place where you can have complex event processing, build out your workflows, build out your dashboards, do reporting, integrate with calendars, all of these sorts of things, and to basically have a one-stop shop where you can do that. So right there, in terms of the overhead of code that you need to write, drops dramatically because you're no longer having to focus on all the glue code. How does this connect to that? Making all these sort of, trying to fit a round peg in a square hole sort of thing. Basically, all of these components have been designed to work together. So that's the first part of where the saving goes in. The next part is, again, the fact that you have this integrated workbench. So one of the things that became very clear when we started kind of getting into the second or third generation of our application engine, let's call this circa 2022, was that as these use cases got more complex, understanding the dependency and the taxonomy of data became very important. And I'll use numbers as an example here. So let's say you've built a system, you've succeeded in building a system that talks to many underlying infrastructures. Let's call it 25. Let's start off with a small number. So 25 different systems, which is really a lot, I would say, for a homegrown solution, not a lot for an application engine, but let's just choose 25. So you've got 25 underlying systems that you've now connected to with your application engine. And each system does an update, let's call it once every year. That still means every other week, something is changing. Some schema, some set of data, some workflow is changing. And so this application engine needs to be able to dynamically look and understand this system changed. How does this impact things? How does this impact workflows down the line? And that's actually where I think almost every organization gets stuck. And that's where we've come up with this term technology debt. Because the technology debt really exists because you want to change things. If everything was done, if like the highway system was complete, you know what I mean, and nothing ever needed to change, then the technology debt doesn't matter quite so much. The technology debt becomes a big thing because you want to be changing and you want to be competing. And what makes it really hard is that you don't have a good taxonomy and you don't have a good dependency graph of understanding that. So what the application engine focuses a lot on, this is where I get back to the workbench part of it, is that once you've integrated with all these systems, you can start to see as systems change, what are the downstream effects of that? And what are the upstream effects if I'm going to make a change? Does that make sense?
Yeah, is this a way to kind of have my cake and eat it too? Is I need more structure and more centralization, but I don't want to be locked into specific platforms. So is that app engine providing essentially a layer of abstraction that kind of does both?
Exactly. And I would say there's a few other pieces of cake as well when you go with this, which is, you also get this added benefit of easy auditability. Because one of the challenges, again, when you start looking at the regulatory and the infrastructure side of things, is that as you have all of these different systems and these systems are talking to each other and the workflows are cutting across these systems, it becomes very hard to audit and understand where data is flowing. Suddenly that sort of processes gets much easier too. So basically, as you start to go down this path, the application engine almost becomes this kind of workhorse that not only allows you to build new use cases going forward, but maintain and have visibility into your existing legacy infrastructure.
So given all that, how much of this is a cultural issue versus a technical issue in these companies? Because sometimes I feel like everybody who's on a different development team has selected a different database and done all these other things, but as a result, there's nobody to kind of drive the app engine decision.
Well, now you've hit on the real question here, which is how much of this is cultural versus technology. And, different organizations have different cultures and different appetites for how they want to operate their IT. But I think that it is becoming overwhelmingly compelling. And I think once you start to mix AI with the application engine, it becomes overwhelmingly compelling. And look, I think that there is sometimes pushback from the status quo when you want to change things. We generally have found much greater success when it comes to coming in with new use cases or use cases that firms have traditionally been struggling with, than trying to rip and replace existing stuff. That's just, I guess this just gets a bit into, human nature, right? Self-preservation. It's a bit difficult. I think we had one of our best customers, and by the way, 5 of the largest tier 1 banks in the world use us for probably somewhere between 500 and 1,000 use cases. So we've had a great success at really large organizations that have 100,000 plus employees. So we definitely see a lot of success there, but it's also a very different animal. It was one of our tier 1s described themselves as, like a huge cruise ship, and it just moves at a certain speed. But once it starts going in that direction, it can move thousands and thousands of people all at once. You know what I mean? And that's what we're seeing. So it takes a long time to get things going in that direction. But once they get going, it's fairly unstoppable. One of our tier 1 banks has actually said they are doing almost 1 use case per day on 3Forge. So, it takes a long time to kind of get the politics in motion and get things moving. But again, once people give it a shot, it is, I would call it, overwhelmingly compelling.
So you mentioned AI a couple of times. Walk us through that a little bit about why AI is forcing this conversation.
Well, forcing this conversation because, well, first off, it's in the news a lot. So people see about it, they know about it. It's affecting markets. And it's a real change agent. I mean, there's just no other way to put it. It's a disruptor. But this is why I think the convergence of the application engine plus AI is just going to just change the world. And let me put it this way. AI itself, now anything can change down the road. Different people have different projections as to where things will going and the impact it will have. What I see for the foreseeable future is that when you take core technologies like your operating system, like your transactional ACID compliant databases, your web browser, Chrome or Firefox, whatever you happen to use. These are, multi-million line, very complex pieces of software technology. Those are not going to be replaced by AI anytime soon. And I understand there's been some academic projects where they've done little bits and bytes here, but when we're talking about these broad solutions, AI is not going to replace those. What AI is facilitating, though, is the rapid understanding of how those tools work. And if you don't mind me kind of taking a side here, think of those as tools. Think of an operating system as a tool. It by itself doesn't really do a whole lot. Again, a browser is a tool. If you don't have a web page, a browser really doesn't mean a whole lot, right? These are tools. But what AI is very good at is understanding tools and their capabilities and how they work together, and basically assisting humans in building solutions on those tools. So now let's introduce for the audience what an application engine is. An application is the ultimate tool. It's like the festool of, I'm sorry, that's I'm a woodworking guy. That's like a premium brand. It's like a festool of software, right? It's basically saying, here is a one-stop shop that gives you everything you need to build applications as a human without having to write large volumes of code. And I don't want to get this confused with low code because that's quite different. An application engine is basically a set of tools allowing you to quickly develop what you need. Then you take that concept and you marry it with artificial intelligence, and now you've got the Holy Grail. Because what you have is you have this complete toolbox of everything you need, and you've got artificial intelligence, which understands how to interact with humans and interact with tools, and then suddenly you have the solution. It's kind of like you have the factory and you have the robots, right? And now you're off to the races.
All right. Well, folks, you heard it here. App engines are going to change the way we think about building and deploying software. It's not necessarily a new idea, but it's going to be an idea that's time has maybe come. Robert, thanks for that show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right. And back to you guys in the studio.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back here to our Predict 2026 sessions. We are, just beyond thrilled to have the Futurum advisory team starring in this year's Predict. When I started the Predict virtual event 8 or 9 years ago, it was always my hope to have analysts giving their predictions, because otherwise, who wants to hear my predictions? And, as part of Techstrong being part of the Futurum group, we now have access to the Futurum analysts. And so we're really lucky to have them presenting here on their predictions, on their views of what 2026 has, and maybe a little beyond, has in store for us. Let me introduce you to our next Futurum analyst. His name is Olivier Blanchard, or as properly pronounced, I'll do my best French accent, Olivier Blanchard, something like that.
Yeah, excellent.
But Olivier, welcome to Predict 2026. We're honored to have you here with us. Before we jump into kind of your predictions, your worldview, why don't you give people maybe a sense of what you do at Futurum, what your beat is, so to speak, and a little bit of your arc in your personal story.
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me, Alan. It's a pleasure and an honor to finally be on. So I'm Olivier Blanchard, or Olivier Blanchard, as you rightly pronounced my name the second time. I'm a research director at the Futurum Group, and my focus is AI devices. So what is AI devices? It's basically any device out there that enables AI. So think like some of the most obvious examples are smartphones, right, with AI capabilities on them, or PCs. But increasingly, it's also smart watches, which will, I'm assuming, become AI watches at some point in the next couple of years. The little rings that measure some of your vitals, right, like all the wearables. Alexa devices are a really good example too of devices that you talk to and talk back and have AI capabilities, and all the way through the Internet of Things, which is still a term. I'm assuming we'll change it soon. So the IoT and the industrial IoT, and all the way to automotive. Cars are also becoming sort of like data centers on wheels. They're increasingly intelligent. We're finally going to get, I think, a decent version of kits, the Knight Rider car that talks back in the next few years, maybe minus the turbo boost, hopefully. So anyway, that's my purview. All these devices that make AI much more interesting and functional at the edge. That's not just AI in the cloud somewhere.
I just feel like I'm your guy, Olivier. I have everything you mentioned, from the watch to the ring to the Alexas and the Sonoses in my car. I have the BMW intelligent agent in the car.
Yeah.
And I don't know how intelligent it is, but I'm your poster child, and what a great world it's in. Well, also, I got to tell you, what an exciting time to be covering this space, right? As I mean, it's literally developing right before our eyes. 2025 was obviously kind of a flag in the sand kind of year, right? For establishing territories and claiming lands and so forth, and building empires, certainly. But 2026 is kind of when this stuff gets real, a lot of people think, anyway. Interested to hear your take on it. Why don't we, if you don't mind, talk about kind of what are your themes in this space for 2026? I know one of them is it's a big year for inference.
Yeah, it is. So I think let's kind of frame 2026 by going back in time a little bit to 2025, and how 2025 was sort of the year of the AI PC, right? We saw a big transition from traditional PCs, whether it's notebooks or desktops, that were they weren't dumb, but they weren't built for AI. Mm-hmm. To all of a sudden this new generation of PCs that have AI capabilities on the device in the silicon. They're specifically designed to be able to handle processing of AI workloads, some training, but mostly inference right there on the device. And so it sort of like ushered the age of on-device AI more so than mobile had. And I'm not really sure why. I think primarily it was a branding exercise. We called these new PCs AI PCs, but we didn't start calling AI-enabled phones AI phones. So I think that might be why there was so much focus on PCs. But the promise of the AI PC, especially in the enterprise and for all of us who use PCs on a daily basis, including right now, is to have sort of like these AI agents and assistants be more embedded in all of the layers of functionality that we normally have to do manually ourselves, right? So if you're in a Word document or a Google Doc, or you're going through a spreadsheet, the idea behind this is to have agents or AI functionality somewhere in there that helps you, edit your copy or create a summary, right? Which are some of the things that we've seen sort of come out in the last year and a half. For a spreadsheet, it might be organizing things, making calculations. If you don't understand or don't remember all the different short code on your keyboard to do certain functions, you can just basically just type it in and the assistant will build whatever integration you want. So these are the things that we're supposed to move to the edge a little bit, be built into your device so that, first of all, you wouldn't have to necessarily, when you're interacting with one of these agents, send the query or the request through your network, right, through your Wi-Fi, all the way to a data center somewhere in the cloud, have a computer there process it, then bring it back, because that takes a little bit of time. What we wanted to do, what we were told was going to happen with AI PCs as early as this year, was that you would be able to do all this locally, that your PC would be able to handle this. Even if you're on a plane, the Wi-Fi doesn't work, or you're in a busy airport and the bandwidth is very limited, you would still be able to work through those times because all the processing would be done on your PC. And then when it reconnected again, or when you're able to, it made sense to connect to the network again, then that functionality might move back to the cloud. It might move back and forth. That didn't really happen. What we got in 2025 was the hardware. We got excellent PCs. I think the Copilot Plus PC category specifically had a lot of AI chops, a lot of AI capabilities. But what was missing in 2025 was the software, right? The ISVs, the independent software vendors, the OS vendors didn't really follow through at the same pace as the hardware vendors. So we had excellent PCs that were capable of doing all these things, but no software to make that happen, or very little of it. I think 2026 begins to change that. So two things are going to happen in 2026. First, the hardware gets even better. I think that towards the second half of 2026, so starting in May, June, we should start seeing some announcements, especially in the PC space, of new chips and new PCs with new capabilities coming out with 5 to 10 times the processing power for AI. So right now, for instance, AI PCs in the Copilot category are somewhere between 45 and 60 tops of capabilities, and that's trillions of operations per second that they can do on the NPU. But the NPU is a neural processing unit, which is kind of like a newish bit of silicon that attaches to the CPU, and that works in conjunction with the CPU and the GPU, specifically for AI. So we're at about 60 right now. We're going to start seeing some mainstream PCs towards the end of the year announced that will be above 200 tops for PC, and probably above 300. And this is for mainstream PCs, not like really high-end, super professional, specialized developer PCs that are much higher. Yeah.
So Olivier,
yeah.
I have to admit something here in front of everyone. I had terrible FOMO this past year. I couldn't justify just running out and buying a new PC. First of all, I'm a Mac guy. And you should know I have an iMac, I have MacBook Pro, I have MacBook Air, I've got multiple iPads, I got all the Mac accessories and wearables. They almost, though they claim to have AI, you know the deal. They really don't.
No.
And I couldn't justify. I mean, I've got M1, M2 devices. I wanted the M4 and M5 just because I'm a gadget boy. But what was missing for me was the killer app.
Yeah.
is summaries. If summarizing my emails and my messages is the killer app for AI, what's all the ballyhoo about? Do you know what I
Exactly.
mean?
No, I hear you.
What's the killer app here? What's going to make me say, God darn it, I'm going to buy a PC?
Okay, well, all right. Let me let me sort of frame this for everybody,
ahead.
right? So there's the consumer sort of version of this, and then there's the enterprise version of this. So if you're a consumer and your perspective feels more consumer than enterprise like, right? And like me, I like my PCs for myself. I'm not an IT director. I don't make decisions for an entire company. I want stuff to work the way I want it to work. You didn't miss much this year. This year was it was a good start, right? Like it was a really good proof of concept. We saw a lot of interest. And we saw the beginning, like basically laying the foundations of the hardware, and integrating that hardware into the enterprise, into people's workflows, into schools, so that like people are starting to use AI. And but most of the AI that they're using, all that summarization, all of those not killer apps yet, but the beginning, the building blocks of the killer apps, most of them still happen in the cloud. So was there a reason to buy an AI PC this year or an M4, M5 device? Yes, they're super high performance device. They're much faster. They're more power efficient. You're going to get a whole day's work out of your battery. They're fantastic PCs, and they will continue to work next year and the year after that and the year after that. Like it's a good investment. The hardware is super solid. So if you bought a PC this year, you're fine. You didn't jump the gun. You're not going to have regrets next year, not major regrets. You'll be fine. Having said that, if you didn't buy a new PC this year and you're waiting until 2026 to do it, you will be rewarded by much better hardware, much better battery power, battery life, efficiency, better security, and at the same time, you'll probably start seeing a lot more software. So there's this sort of disconnect, which is what I'm trying to get at, between the hardware, which is already very good and getting better almost exponentially year over year, and the AI software, which is still mostly a cloud play. It's all in the data center. It's all in the cloud. It's all browser based, and not much of it is really happening on the PC just yet. So when you're asking about killer apps, first, there's no real killer app yet, other than the chatbots like the Chat GPTs and the Geminis and the Alexas, which is sort of like a UX thing. It's actually, it's not even a UX. It's a UI. It's a user interface that is beginning to test the capabilities of AI and is teaching us to interact with AI. It's not really a killer app. It's a training tool for now, but there's not really a killer app on the device just yet. The killer app is going to be the ability to tell a PC to do what you want it to do, or to tell an app what you want it to do, and for the PC to just take over. Sort of like a good friend of mine who's a database specialist. So we were just having this conversation yesterday. Told me, like, right now, whether it's GPT or Gemini, it's kind of like you have to train them like they're your youngest and least experienced intern. Right? You tell them what to do, they're going to get it right a few times, and then they're going to forget how to do it, and then you have to retrain them, and that's kind of where we are. In the next few years, we'll start seeing these systems become much more intelligent, much more organized, much better at remembering the training that you've given them, or the instructions that you've given them over time, and getting things right. And not only just getting things right, but the prompts becoming much simpler, much shorter, so that you'll kind of have like this working relationship with agents, like this sort of verbal shorthands that will make things a lot easier, and that will allow them to go deeper into these apps, whether it's Word or a database, or Spotify, to create songs or playlists, and they'll have a lot more access to all of these apps. We're not just quite there yet. On the enterprise side, the play this year was twofold. One of the big drivers of PC adoption and AI PC adoption this year was actually not the AI. It was the end of support for Windows 10. So a lot of enterprises had to switch to Windows 11. Windows 11 PCs are AI PCs. So by default, we saw the enterprise and the commercial segment move into AI PCs fairly quickly last year, but it wasn't because of AI. It was because of that. But the second play with that is that you need to start future proofing for AI. And whether the AI, whether it's agents or AI applications that you're running are 100% in the cloud or a portion of it in the cloud or on device, these PCs are actually better at performing workloads and at working and multitasking, even if the AI application is in the cloud. So there is an advantage to getting these PCs, even if you're not running a lot of AI locally. So the future proofing is sort of like establishing this baseline of PCs, getting them into your network, into your fleet, learning how to manage them, learning how to configure them and use them. And then when some of these applications that can be run locally come into the market, then you already have this baseline of PCs that you can use and leverage in your organization.
Love it.
Yeah.
Let me go to a second theme on your theme top hits of themes for 2026. And this is one I've heard a lot too, right? 2025 was, and even 2024 was very much the year of training AI, training LLMs. This year coming up and in the years to follow, it's going to be much more about inference. Right? Different kinds of chips. You don't need those NVIDIA monster chips. You can get away with Trainiums, and all the cloud providers are having their own inference chips. Broadcom is huge in this. But really, back to your theme of the edge and on the end device, it's really about inference at the edge as well as in the cloud. Right? So it's moving from training to inference and then moving inference closer to the user.
Correct. Yeah. You want to move the data closer to the user, or actually, you want the processing to happen at the source where the data lives, and the data lives with us, right? So the closer you can bring the AI processing to the user, the better. And there are a few reasons for that. One of them, especially when we're dealing with conversational AI, whether it's Alexa as a voice AI or ChatGPT as more of a keyboard or touchscreen AI. If you're having that conversation, if you're having that dialogue with your AI, you're telling it to do something, you're asking it questions, and it needs to answer. What you don't want is asking a question and then there's pause, and then you wait and wait and wait, and then maybe you get a partial answer, and then you wait again, and then you get another answer. That's not really functional. People just kind of like disconnect from that. It's useful, but it's not great. What you want is for your device, your interface, whether it's a PC or a phone or your AI glasses or whatever, to respond immediately. When I'm talking to Alexa in my kitchen, for instance, I ask her a question. I don't want to wait 30 seconds. I want an answer right away. Even if it's a sort of a preliminary answer, like, hey, I heard your question. Let me think about this. I'm going to ask a couple more questions, or like, why are you asking this? Like starting a conversation while in the background, the AI is going to the cloud, doing some search, figuring out what the answer is, and then coming back to you. And so a lot of this inference has to be done locally. The inference is essentially sort of like the UX layer of AI. It's what we experience, and it's the processing of what your question means and how to answer. For instance, that's part of the inference layer. And so what we're seeing is with better silicon and with better software and just better devices designed for this specific purpose is this sort of immediacy of response, where you can feel like you are having a conversation with someone, even though it's an AI, that feels natural, like the conversations that we're having now, right? If I say something and I pause for 2 seconds, you're going to fill that space with a question or a comment or an acknowledgement of some kind. And it's that sort of interaction that we're looking for. And so that has to be done at the edge. That has to be done on the device. And so what we're seeing this year is this push to create these experiences so that it becomes much more natural and fulfilling and just nice, enriching to have these engagements with an AI at any moment. Which also brings me to another part of my prediction for 2026 is that steady shift from keyboards and touchscreens to voice interfaces. We're seeing this with Alexa. Obviously, I keep talking about Alexa because I think they're in the forefront of this. They're a voice first agentic platform, as opposed to most of the other ones that are sort of like type based. But also the rise of, these aren't AI glasses, but AI glasses, this form factor of having glasses on your face that have cameras that can see, that have microphones that can hear, and that have
Speakers that can talk to you too, though.
right. And so you can tell an AI, you can ask it questions, you can tell it to take a picture, start recording. You can ask
So I've
it,
been
hey,
waiting for them to come out because I use readers. So
Yeah.
you know, the Ray-Bans are the Ray-Ban Meta ones are the ones everyone's playing with, but they don't have them in readers yet, and they're crazy expensive. I don't really need a prescription per se. But
Yeah.
you hit on something that's kind of near and dear to me, Olivier. I've been looking at human computer interaction for years, like 20 years already, right? Because, I mean, let's face it, the whole Windows mouse keyboard thing is something that Xerox, which should give you an idea of how old this is, right?
Yeah.
It's something that Xerox cooked up, when was it, in the 60s or the 70s in Park, right? And it's done great, don't get me wrong. We've all
Yeah.
learned computing on that,
Yeah. I mean, we had typewriters first, right? So we
Well,
we,
yeah.
we started
But
right.
no, but the whole Windows mouse
Yeah.
sort of interface,
Yeah.
and we've taken it to extremes and really done its thing. But its time has come. Its time has passed, rather. It is time.
Right.
It is time. I'm not saying we're going to go full blown Star Trek and Hello Computer from Scotty, or something like that. But I agreed. I, for one, am looking into, for instance, I want to change the interface for the way when people come to DevOps.com or Security
Yeah.
Boulevard or any of our sites, rather than throwing them up what is in essence an electronified version of a newspaper.
Yeah.
I'd rather have an agent talk to them and say, Olivier, what can I help you with today?
Yeah.
A
Exactly.
librarian, if you will.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think, I don't think we're getting rid of the keyboard anytime soon. The keyboard has its place, right? And the touch screen also has its place. I think, it's this form factor is very useful for certain applications. This form factor is very useful for some applications. But sometimes you don't need it, right? Or sometimes you might be driving. I mean, it's obviously why voice is a big component of a car user interface. You want to be able to use whatever interface you need for what you're trying to accomplish. And sometimes you might not be able to get what you want. You might not want to dictate a letter or an email or paper by voice. Like I'm a writer. I've been a writer for a long time, even before I was in tech. And I don't love the keyboard. I'm not really good at typing. But if I had to dictate by voice what is in my head, it wouldn't work. I would just spend many more hours trying to figure that out than by typing. But obviously, yeah, voice is a huge thing, and especially for like these short interactions, like even a search. Well, I can have a conversation about something. Yesterday, I was talking to another friend who mentioned somebody who had done this thing and was related to this actor, and I couldn't figure it out. So I had to type a couple of searches, and eventually I found the answer that I was looking for. But it would have been much easier for me to just speak to an AI and say, hey, all right, this is the information I have, right? This actor who was in this movie was married to this person, and she did this thing and was known for this famous line that went viral in a little YouTube video. Who am I thinking about? And it would go and look that up, and I don't have to type or anything. Is the store that I'm driving to right now still open, or did they already close? Like, these are the sorts of interactions that you can have on a daily basis. And to me, you were asking about the killer app earlier. The killer app is this sort of ubiquitous, low friction, high reward ability to have all of your questions answered or all of your tasks performed by a multitude of agents and assistants that are just ready to help you at any moment, whether you're connected to the cloud or you're just in the middle of the woods with one device. Having the ability to have your questions answered, know where you are, know what you need to do next, do things that you need to do in the moment That I think is the promise of AI, and we're still very far from that. But 2026 is the beginning of the software and the hardware, especially at the edge, becoming more closer to the ultimate goal of having this ubiquitous sort of AI that follows you around and does what you need it to.
I
Yeah.
don't disagree with you. I think even like you mentioned the summarizations before, they become a lot more effective when they're read to me rather than me having to click on them and read
Yeah.
them or something, right? I think that's the natural environment for the summaries is, let me summarize it for you and tell me what that summary is.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back, Olivier, you know, we mentioned on the enterprise front, because look, most of our people work for large enterprises, truth be told, right? So you mentioned, you know, by next May or June, the hardware on these PCs are going to be 100, 200% or more effective, powerful, however you want to call it, right, than what we've seen up to now. And at the same time, the need to do inferencing, especially on the endpoint, on the edge, is going to really explode. So is the power of these is it in the NPUs? That is, the NPU does inferencing, or are we going to need a new generation of inferencing chips that supplement the CPU, the GPU, the MPU, and now we got another PU, right, on our
Right.
PCs to do inferencing?
Yeah. XPU, right?
Mhm.
Yes. The answer is yes to both. I think the MPU can do this really well. The issue now is that developers and ISVs have been essentially building or developing apps for the GPU for a really long time, and now in the last year we've asked them to kind of switch the MPU, which is part of the reason why it's been a little slow to change. I think that there's going to be more innovation in that world in the next year. Well, definitely in the next few years. I think in the next year we're still looking at the NPU sort of leading that. But one of the interesting developments in the silicon world, whether it's in the data center or on devices, so I only care about devices, so I'm just going to talk about that, is actually the role that memory and storage play in this. There's been so much noise about GPUs for training, GPUs for inferencing as well, although I think CPUs are better suited for that. But what we don't talk about, what hasn't been as sexy as the big NVIDIA GPUs, is memory. You need for inference, you need to have a lot of storage where the models and all the data processing, all the learning that's been done by the AI sort of lives, right? So that it can be drawn from at any moment to be able to answer a query. But also the memory in the sense that when you're interacting with an AI assistant, all of those interactions have to be just kind of like held in a memory, and all of the queries have to be held in memory. So there's this constant back and forth of data and information that has to be processed. And while the processing is happening, you need those data packets to be held somewhere, right? And so memory is super, super, super important. Memory has to be designed and architecture specifically for those types of use cases in order for it to be really effective and efficient. And so I think that we're going to see companies like Micron, for instance, but there are some other ones as well. Samsung's one of them. Start to emphasize memory as well. It's always been sort of like a commodity silicon, right? It's just like a cheap part, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a minute, we can't. There's the demand for really good AI enabling memory is outstripping supply. So what we might see this year is
seeing it. I mean, the memory market is, it's volatile to say the least, because basically the ones you mentioned, Micron, Samsung, and some of the Taiwanese, every single piece of wafer or whatever that they can produce is already bought and paid for.
Yeah.
Right. If we're going to see growth, where's growth coming from?
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because one, high demand, low supply, without the ability to really respond to that super quickly. That's going to make prices rise a little bit, I'm assuming. So get ready to pay a little bit more in addition to tariffs and everything else for your devices. But also, what might happen is we might start seeing more focus on the memory specs of devices, as opposed to before, where it was kind of like, you're looking at the kind of what processor is in there. It's always been kind of like the CPU. You might start thinking about like what the GPU or the NPU can do in a PC, for instance. Now you're also, when you're going to look at the bill of materials, you're also going to be looking for what kind of memory you have in order to see what kind of performance you can expect from a device. And that's going to change things. So for the average person who doesn't understand any of this stuff, no. But for people who are a little bit more focused on specs and performance, that memory component is also going to be part of that research parameter when you're trying to pick what device you need for your particular use case. If you're like a graphic designer, for instance, or just somebody like me who uses PCs for general use.
Got it.
Yep.
Olivier, I'd like to sit and talk to you more about this. I'd love to talk to you more about the intelligent voice assistants beyond Alexa even. But we only have 30 minutes and we're over that already. I apologize. But for people watching this who say, hey, I'd like to follow Olivier, I'd like to stay up on his research, what do you recommend to them?
Well, the easiest thing is just to go to futurumgroup.com and look me up in the research director or analyst directory. And that will connect you to my X, formerly Twitter, to my LinkedIn, to all of my articles, all of my research. If you forget that URL, just Google me. Just remember, I am not the Olivier Blanchard, who is the former director of the IMF. That's the International Monetary Fund,
Right.
not the Impossible Mission Force.
Sorry for you.
Yeah. So futurumgroup.com and just look at the analyst directory and I'll be there.
And I will just emphasize that one of the nice things about the Futurum Group advisory analyst business is they don't put a lot of it behind the reg wall. A lot of it is available. You don't have to be a paying customer to get your hands on the latest research. So go check it out. Olivia,
Some of it.
Well, some of it is, but compared to other analyst firms where you really can't get anything other than a blurb, right, without paying. Olivier, thank you so much for making Predict 2026 better by your presence and your predictions. We appreciate you. Continued success and keep us posted.
Thanks a lot for having me. I hope I'll be back next year.
Absolutely. Or before. We've got a lot more on Predict 2026. We've got so many great analysts and predictions. Stay tuned. For now, this is Alan Schimmel. Thank you.
My name is Min-Se Kim. I'm the wireless product manager. So I've been doing Wi-Fi a long time. And now I'm doing mostly at the agentic ops because every Cisco employee is working on the agentic ops as a North Star. And then when it comes to the enterprise network and Wi-Fi network, Muhammad covered a little bit about what does it mean for my enterprise network, my campus network, when we come and see the AI era. In fact, I had some chat on the back with chatting with my customer, and he's kind of coming back, has his old COVID the panics. What that means is they now see the demand soaring. All the chipset and component pricing is rising, DRAM price going up crazy. So they said, okay, I might have to buy Wi-Fi 7 right now because the price of my AP might go up anytime. So we see some interesting changes that AI even is changing the customers' buying cycles. But it's not about the purchasement, it's actually happening across the whole domain. And then when it comes to Wi-Fi, and AI, when you find that common denominator, one common denominator is a physical AI. Because when we talk about the AI, we always think about the AI infrastructure being something in the data center, right? Oh, there's data center connectivity, data center power consumption. But in reality, how we consume those data, how we train the robot, you're probably very familiar with how you train the robot, right? There's an operator. with the VR goggle, doing the stuffs, and the robot mimic it simultaneously while we sending all the 710 video feed to the central cloud, the AI cloud, to create the model. And what interface they were using, what type of network technology that we use on that? Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 6E, and 7. So Wi-Fi become crucial point on the entire consumption cycle of AI ecosystem, from the training, from the downloading, to the actual the consumption. So we are looking for Wi-Fi to be a sub-millisecond latency with a multi-gig performance as a last mile. So when you talk about the ultra Ethernet with 100 gig and more, yep, for sure, because a single Wi-Fi access point can easily handle 5 gig and 6 gig. Maybe I can talk about the AP topic later on, but you can find the most of the enterprise vendor. Of course, we start with the Cisco that we launched the high-end Wi-Fi 7 AP first, starting with the 20 gigabps of the backhaul speed on the AP that placed on the ceiling, right? And imagine that this type of hotel that have 500 AP or 400 AP, what types of a network link that you needed? Multi-terabyte VPS. That's kind of a common expectation that we want to see from the AI era. So these changes are driving adoption a lot. For example, like a car manufacturing, all the top 5 US car manufacturers are using Cisco, including some foreign company who built a factory in US also using Cisco. I'm talking with them daily basis, and their top interest is now their environment is changing. Now we have to find a way to work along with the robot. And how robot get operated? Wi-Fi. There's no other technology because there's no wire on the robot. Similarly, the medical spaces, they are the first adopter of the AI, all the image scanning and readings and the remote services. They are using AI to train the images and train the model. And where to start from it? Yeah, they have to scan the images with the mobile devices. And then workspace also being involved because of the post-COVID era, we all back to office, and then spatial knowledges and the real estate investment is an extremely crucial point of the cost control. Having said that, are we ready for AI era and agentic ops with the Wi-Fi 7? I think that as an infrastructure, the first requirement is, hey, we have to support from the low end all the way to the up end. So when you look at the AP's capacity, normally we don't really go by the, hey, is this really good AP, bad AP? I mean, it's a bit difficult to kind of draw the line. Hey, this is AP that considers the best AP. So one of the, if I give it a one rules of thumb, easy way to identify the good and better and best is go by special stream. Special stream is the same as gas car cylinder. 4-cylinder, 6-cylinder, 8-cylinder, 10-cylinder. V10 engine, V12 engine, right? So our latest one is a V16. I don't know any sports car with a V60. Maybe some big trucks, right? So 16 special stream is only came from Cisco. There's no other vendor building 16 special stream AP because it's so, massively powerful. Many vendors saying that, yeah, this is too powerful for my taste. But the Cisco building, yeah. Sorry, I cannot move it. Yeah, I have to stay here. So 16 special stream all the way to 2 special stream, it fits everywhere. But the point is this. When you talk about the Wi-Fi is no longer about just traditional 802.11. 802.11 we've been using for the last 20 years, and is really designed for zero latency, zero rows, 10 gig, 20 gig throughput and data that AI infrastructure needed. May or may not, right? Because the Wi-Fi has been, what is the biggest problem with Wi-Fi? Is it speed or reliability? Reliability, right? So most of the time, my Wi-Fi, after post 100 meg, I don't really have much of a remorse.
Well, I have a question about that.
Yes.
I'm noticing kind of the lack of mention of the ultra reliable wireless backhaul.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
You're talking about reliability.
That's what I'm coming. That's what I'm coming. Yeah, that's the next slide that I have it. So what we found was the Wi-Fi protocol itself has to be evolved to provide a more reliable connection. But we can't wait for industry, because now we realize that industry starts talking about it in Wi-Fi 8 and Wi-Fi 9. All right, I mean, we are talking about the AI right now. Do we have to wait another 4 years, another 5 years, another 10 years for client to be ready? So let's get it ready. Let's deliver the outcome to the end user. That's why that all of our Cisco Wi-Fi 7 AP capable to operate ultra reliable wireless backhaul. And I'll show you the demo that how does it changes the entire landscape of a wireless experiences. Right next to it, right? When you talk about the Wi-Fi is always unpredictable because Wi-Fi connection is a stateless. There's no connection per se in terms of Wi-Fi. So that's why that is always unpredictable. Sometimes connect, sometimes disconnect, because there's no stringent connection control. And then even the media access is random, rather, right? It's very opportunistic. So in the Ethernet world, that was another issue. But the Ethernet, they increase the clock speed. They have a dedicated medium switching, so it's fine. But in wireless, it's shared medium. In the shared medium, without stringent access control, you can't really have a predictable connection, which is bad for robotics, which is bad for any of our autonomous system. So what's the best way to handle it? Building the next generation wireless. I will show you the demo that how does it difference between two. So essentially, we have a 2 AP running with a Wi-Fi as well as an ultra reliable wireless backhaul. So because of the Cisco AP have so many radio, I told you that we have a 16 special stream with 16 trucks, right? So we dedicate the one radio into Wi-Fi, other radio into ultra reliable Wi-Fi. I mean wireless backhaul. So and then let's imagine that how your new physical AI board operate in the factory spaces or workspaces along with you. So we place the little wheel on computer. Yeah, we have a typical general AP on the ceiling, right? And then my TME, the Chris was kind of running through with that little the the lunch table, then catering. So we have a two system. One system on the right-hand side showing Wi-Fi statistics. On the other hand, ultra-reliable statistics on the left-hand side. Look at all this jitter. Look at all these jitters and the fluctuation between two. Did you notice that big blip on the Wi-Fi? Why that happen? Yep, because the Wi-Fi only can cover so much of area. If I put like 30 feet or 20 feet away from the AP, client need to join the new AP. So every time that the client get disconnect and reconnect, there is a blip. And the blip might be as short as a 30 millisecond or as long as a 2-3 seconds of a delay. And that can be really, the life and death matter, right? So, but when you look at the ultra-reliable wireless backhaul, it's like a switching Ethernet. It's like a freaking 1 gig switching port, right? You don't see any blip. You don't see any jitters on the latency. So that you can almost as if you use your board and physical AI devices as a connected devices and wired experiences. So this is what we are looking for Wi-Fi in next gen. And the great news about the Cisco is you don't need to wait for another next gen because the Cisco is ready to provide it. And then many of our factory spaces are expecting this to be part of their next gen infrastructure. I mean, we are working with the key manufacturer. Glad that in the US, a lot of manufacturing is coming back. And then we are talking with pharmaceutical and logistics, and we are expecting a huge boost of the new way of connectivity control in the AI infrastructure. What's next? Wi-Fi is great, but what we build is the Wi-Fi infrastructure as a multi-purpose wireless connectivity solution. I don't know if you are keeping up with all these gadget uses, and Apple announced the new Apple AirTag 2, right? So which they provide the longer latency, longer coverages, and better accuracy, longer battery time, and all that, right? And I was thinking that, okay, the consumer industries are evolving, that they're making the UWB as a part of the day-to-day, the past. Why don't you use that UWB in my enterprise network? So can you make usage of UWB using my existing Wi-Fi infrastructure or Wi-Fi plus UWB? And says yes. So this is another great leap from the traditional location services, spatial awareness. Because in Wi-Fi world, the location accuracy always been a primary blocker that give us a bit of remorse that sometimes the location accuracy may be okay. It might be 5 meters or 7 meters away from the actual location, maybe 10 feet away from the actual location, and tracking performance is also not great as it's supposed to be. So we have to solve the two fundamental problem on the location services. One is location accuracy, second is location latency. So how we can solve all that with the proper pricing and infrastructure support. So that all of a 20 or almost 3-decade-old problem resolved with the Cisco Wi-Fi 7 AP. Here's one example that we use. When you manage it as a NetOps, right? The biggest difference between the Wi-Fi versus switching and backend on the data center, most of the NetOps team do not really know where is my AP installed. Why? Because AP is installed in the 5,000 miles away by third-party contractor or subcontractor, right? We never know, really. We only give them a little blueprint from the Echo and Hamina. Okay, place the AP right here. And then someone, they take a picture, but they can't send the picture of 100, right? So location has been always a bit of deterministic based on the certain assumption that, yeah, probably the user might install somewhere there. And what we have done was we are making use of the latest and greatest technology of location, 802.11mc, other name FTM, fine time measurement, or UWV, and we actually do the sensor fusion to really create the the location detection in the sub-meter, so like 1 feet. So this was another great initiative. The innovation. Every NetOps Wi-Fi professional was looking for this feature for the last 2 decades. So I'm one of them. I'm so glad that now we are able to pull that trigger. And then it goes beyond just a network to network and AP to AP. What about the asset, right? So let's look at the other demo. So how the asset tracking is also evolved in the new Wi-Fi 7 era. So this is our SF12 office, San Francisco office, where my desk located. And then my friend's, he's testing on he's looking at some of these assets he left off. So he opened up his browser. He doesn't need to install anything. He just open up the browsers and click the QR code. You got the location of the current whereabout, and find out, okay, I left my asset on the north corner of the building. So it's walking through. So while it's walking, there's real-time tracking is happening. So you might have seen this demo a few times, but here is the true innovation is coming on the later part of the demo. Just look at it, right? Step by step, it's tracking you. In real time, it's and then we observe it, the whereabouts of the users. But at the same time, the user is actually tracking and searching for his missing asset, right? He's not looking for the meeting room, which is a fixed location. He's looking for the asset that he just need to find out where he left. So he's continually walking down the alley, and then when he reached the close to the alley, let's see what he found. All right, there's a notification alert. Okay, you must be nearby the tag, right? So he found it, and this is a true innovation. Let's say that let's move the tag. It's slightly it's like a 1 feet next to the original location. You see that the tag location was switched immediately. So this is innovation. We have this similar solution from maybe AirTag with a one consumer guy with a one bag, luggages. But now imagine that you can do it in the scale of thousands and tens of thousands and millions of assets. So whole world of a NetOps operation will be changing to the new world. And imagine what types of spatial awareness and asset knowledge translate into the AI world, right? When it comes to the AI analytics, first thing that I have to have is a data set, right? We need to have a data. We need to have the physical world model that digitizes all my assets. And who can help and what can help? Wi-Fi 7 infrastructure. It understands the existing whereabouts of the humans, asset, and the system, and then they're able to populate it on the digital world, and the data set is using the AP as an uplink, and then the uplink can be done by Wi-Fi, BLE, Zigbee, Thread, UWB, you name it. So many of them, so versatile. So this is how we change the whole thing. So let me talk about the third topic. I don't have much time, so I will talk about the third topic, which is what mean by AI from the NetOps point of view. The NetOps point of view, they have a couple things. The first one is they have to keep up to date, change management. And you know what is the most common change management in the NetOps world? Firmware upgrade. Because even though that someone never changed the VLAN for their entire lifespan of the certain branch, they probably have to upgrade their firmware time to time due to a certain security vulnerability, due to a certain new feature that I'm looking for, new certain policy changes, so we have to switch the firmware. One thing that we have done was we built the AI model inside of the system. How is it possible? Because the Cisco have 35 million AP on the customer side. And 35 million AP with the various generation and AP type, we are collecting the real-time telemetry. We are collecting that when the AP got up, down, the crash it and why crash it. And we use all this data to push imaging intelligently and smartly. And we also make use of the customer's rollback decision. So when the customer get the rollback, it flags the separate tagging, and we engage the people to look at why the customer rolled back the code and so on. So this whole ecosystem done in the orchestration of the AI operation of the DevOps and the CI/CD, our continuous integration and continuous development. Other one is the RRM, right? When you talk about the RF and Wi-Fi config never stand in static setting. Wi-Fi configuration always changing by every minute, every 30 minutes, every hour. Why? Because RF is keep accommodating the new changes. And then now how AI changed that whole landscape? Previously, channel changing was done with a very simple rule engine. So it keeps forget what happened 5 minutes ago. So it keeps coming back to all the interference location, which is bad. Using AI, it mark it, it avoid it, so it intelligently optimize it. So final outcome, you have a minimum change with a maximum outcome, which is all possible thanks to the AI. The last one. What if we convert AP as a bot? Now we are living in the world of a bot, right? Intelligent bot. So this is the same story. Let's make the AP as a synthetic client. So AP was voluntarily, proactively converted itself as a client and associate to the nearby AP, collect the statistics, and then allow us to make the informed decision and proactive recommendation and what to do in your network. So overall, and you can see the entire integration done at the ThousandEye dashboard, starting with the client, which is AP as a synthetic client, which is never happened in the past. So this is first time in the industry as well, by the way, as one that we have a pure AP learning as a synthetic client, connect with a wireless. No one in the industry has done it before. So what's the takeaway for the three? We talked about the new infrastructure, how the new infrastructure changed the entire landscape. Unreliable, unpredictable, slow speed Wi-Fi is all bygone. We are talking about even beyond the multi-gig, right? We are talking about the 10G access at the AP level with the zero latency, zero loss traffic, including roaming environment. And now we got the spatial awarenesses, and now all the spaces becoming your assets, thanks to the new connectivity and thanks to the new AI infrastructure. And then last, as a NetOps, they're also changing. We also support the full AI assistant, of course, but AI assistant is a final interface, mostly happen at a pool basis, right? But what if we let AI to optimize network all the time? And this is not a future. This is actually today, we have more than 8,000 AI RLM customers using, optimizing 1 million AP across 5 million clients. So there's extreme, success stories around the AI-powered NetOps. So hoping to have continually check out what Cisco is doing in our campus spaces. All right, I will hand off to Kiran. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Minsei, and thank you to Rahul, Shai, and Kenny for some hopefully great engaging presentations. So just to close out, hopefully you got a flavor for how we at Cisco are using AI to make it better for IT admins to operate and manage networks. Also, hopefully you got a flavor for how we are building networking so that it can deliver the performance and security that's required in this AI era. I'll just remind you of the 3 pillars around the 3 guiding principles that we're really using as we build out our networking infrastructure today, right? So how are we simplifying operations and using agentic ops to do that? How we're fusing security into our devices as we build them, not just at the hardware level, but also at the software level. And then how are we making our devices scalable so that for the next era of disruption, Cisco devices will still remain valid. Lastly, there is an AI summit next week happening here in actually San Francisco. It's free to register. It's online. It's delivered virtually on the 3rd of February. And we've got some real powerhouses that will be joining us live at that event. So I encourage you guys, if you have the time to sign up, it's free to sign up and join, and enjoy the event. Thank you very much.